Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 307. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another episode with the fantastic Cara Wilde. Today we are going to talk about how to connect with nature spirits. Now, that's something I've been talking about a lot lately. As you know, my recent book was all about talking with the tree spirits, if trees could talk, life lessons from the wisdom of the woods. But there are other types of nature spirits out there, and they may be making an appearance in one of my future books, but I haven't started that yet, so I don't have more information for you, aside from what I talk about in this episode. But Cara's got a lot of experience with this, more than I do. So I really was looking forward to having this conversation with her, and we were both really, really pleased with how this podcast came out. I think it's going to be a great introduction to how to see, recognize, talk to, connect with nature spirits, and how you can get started doing that if that's something that interests you. So what will you learn? We will talk about what exactly are nature spirits. And from that, the conversation leads on to what is animism and how that informs our relationship with nature spirits. We ask the question, do they actually exist? And how do you know that? We explore who the different nature spirits are, because there are a lot of different species of nature spirits. We explore why you might want to connect with them. We ask the questions, can anyone do this? Or do you need special skills? Or perhaps formal learning? Do you have to take a workshop or go on a course? Or can you just go out and experience? We explore how you can get started connecting with nature spirits. We talk about why we need to have the right attitude when we attempt to connect with them, and why having the right attitude makes it so much easier. If you've read my book, If Trees Could Talk, you will be aware of Windmill Hill Sycamore, who called me out on not having the right attitude one time when I went to connect with that tree. So it's very, very important. It just makes things easier. And it's more respectful. We talk about where to go if you want to connect with nature spirits. Do you have to go into the deep woods, or can you just go to your garden? We also talk about what to avoid, and this is a really important point that Cara brings up. Where to avoid, what to avoid when you go out in nature to connect. So where should you go, where should you not go, and how to make it easy to connect with nature spirits. So I hope you find this episode interesting and useful. Before I get into the episode, I would love to invite you to join me on Patreon. As you may have heard, that's where I'm hanging out these days. And that's where I'm offering most of my services and offerings in addition to my books. So I would love to have you join me there. If you head over to patreon.com/Holly Wharton, and that's patreon.com/Holly Wharton, you can join me there. If you get value from this podcast, I would love to have your support on Patreon. You can join up from just $1 a month, and you get exclusive access to content and services that I don't offer anywhere else. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. I hope you find it interesting and useful. Hello and welcome. I'm super excited to be back talking with Cara Wilde about very exciting nature things. Today we're going to talk about how to see or recognize or talk to nature spirits. We're going to talk about what are nature spirits, do they actually exist, how to connect with them, what the different types are, why you might want to connect with them, and can you connect with them? Can anyone connect with them, or do you have to have some special skills or formal training? We're going to be talking about all that and more. I'm super excited about this. Hello, Cara.
Hi.
This is something that's obviously been at the top of my mind ever since I started connecting with trees last year for my tree book. but I've really wanted to kind of expand my communication with different types of nature spirits. And I feel like this is something that you've been doing for years. So I'm very excited to be talking about this with you.
Okay. This is something that I happen to be doing by accident.
Isn't that how it all starts?
I know, it does. So what do you think nature spirits are?
So, I mean, on one hand, we've got the spirits of the things that are in nature. So the plants, the trees, the minerals, the rocks, the stones, the animals. But on the other hand, we've got the fae, we've got the fairies, we've got all that world. And I consider all of those things to be kind of part of the nature spirit world. So I've definitely communicated more with the plants and the animals than I have with the fae. I feel like that's kind of the next step in my journey. And I got a very clear message that that's going to be one of my next books. So in the same way that I communicated with the tree spirits to get the tree book, I'm going to be communicating with the fae to get a fae book. But that's a big step up for me because I don't have experience with that. Like I'll kind of communicate with them, but I don't get very much back from them. So it's going to be kind of my next stage of development, I think, in terms of talking to spirits.
Okay. So is that the sense that there's like a hierarchy for you there then?
It's not necessarily a hierarchy. It's just something I've not developed as much.
Right.
So it's new to me.
Okay. I think we see nature spirits like really similarly. So for me, it's the remembering that everything has a spirit, like the computer.
Yes.
Everything's got like an energetic blueprint of its highest order. And it's really hard because we have this like hierarchical language and it's not like that. But I think everything else, like there's got this divine blueprint. And I think that nature spirits are in charge of the higher order of nature and looking after and taking care. And like when you think about the gnomes, for example, that might take care of the trees, or some divas that might take care of the flowers, then they have the blueprint of the highest order and they can kind of try and give that to the plant. But it also depends on the soil that they're in, the amount of pollution that they're surrounded by. So it's much like our higher self. That's how I see it.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about this divine blueprint? So people who might not have heard that term.
So it's when we use terms like the highest good, what is for your highest good, the highest order, or in psychology terms, I guess that's like your potential. That's what I mean by it.
Yeah, perfect. Good.
Yeah. And how everything kind of works together to fit like this jigsaw piece of like the divine plan, if you believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing you're talking about, and I think this is really important to call out, is the concept of animism, that everything has a spirit, even stuff that you would think doesn't have a spirit, like your computer or your glasses or, your microphone. And I think that's a new concept for a lot of people. I think it's easier for people to imagine people having a spirit, animals having a spirit, but I think it's harder for some people to recognize that inanimate objects have a spirit as well. So I think that's a really new concept for people. How did you start to embrace that concept?
I think it's when I first came across metaphysics and I guess the Seth material, like 25 years ago was. And Reiki, when I first started looking at this like other dimension, it just made sense to me that everything in existence is from the divine. Everything in existence is from source. So therefore, everything has a non-physical counterpart. So it made sense that then everything had like a spirit, because what we call a spirit is just a non-physical expression of something, really. That's a bit basic, but that's where it came from. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I think I've kind of opened up to more in the last few years, or especially in the last year working with the tree spirits for my book. And then looking up, I was doing some research when I was writing the book, thinking, how am I going to explain this to people? Because most people don't think trees have a spirit. So I need to give some background here. And then I started looking up animism and came across a blog that covered animism and started reading more about that. And then was reminded that a lot of people do believe that computers and stuff have spirits as well. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. And I think it's interesting what you said about Reiki, because I remember years ago, like Reiki was the first kind of energetic healing thing I ever trained in. And
kind of just for a lot of people.
I think so. It's like the gateway. And that was back in like 2002 or 2003. And I remember I had this new skill. I was super excited. I felt this weird stuff in my hands. I was using it on myself every day. And then I remember one time being at work, and this was in the middle of the jungle in Mexico where I used to live, and the computers went down. And it was like I was trying to fix them the normal way you would fix a computer. It wasn't working. And I just thought, I'm just going to give it Reiki. And I remember I did, and then it started up, and I was like, I don't know if that was that thing I just did or was something else, or whether I just needed a respite. But that was the first time I thought of using this skill with technology. So obviously, if you're working at the energetic level with something like Reiki, everything has energy. So yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah. And so my version of that story is, I guess, I was with some friends and we were needing some batteries, and it was my friend's camera and his batteries had run out. And so I said, well, give them to me. You're supposed to be able to charge them with Reiki. And we did the magic, take them out and put them back in again. And then somehow they miraculously worked out the batteries. And that had not worked. They really were quite dead. And so I just held them in my hands, and I was kind of like, I don't know, this is going to work, but just imagined it, and then gave them back. And they lasted like the rest of the day. They lasted a few hours, and he was very much a disbeliever, and he just was, don't talk to me. I don't know what just happened. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. It's freaking me out. I'm just going to ignore it. Don't talk to me. So yeah, and shamanism, I guess when I was starting to look at Huna shamanism, which is Hawaiian shamanism, the adventurous kind of shamanism, everything that I was reading around that time was all about working with the energies of anything, working at that energetic level, because that's where you can have the most impact and the easiest impact. So for me, I'd come from this background of like intellectually trying to understand metaphysics, shamanism, the workings of the universe, that kind of, and I'd not even really done any kind of connections with nature or anything like that. It was all this intellectual process and trying to just affect my life.
Yeah.
Whereas my introduction to nature spirit came a lot later, and that came as a result of me moving to Cornwall, moving to a new area. And I said to Source, can you show me, I want to connect with new soul friends. Like I want, just place me on the path of soul friends. And so I put this call out to Source, and then followed impulses and synchronicities and got invited to this new spiritual group that kind of dwindled down and just left us with a group of pagans. And so they were witches and sea witches, head witches, all that kind of thing. And they introduced me to nature, because we've had this conversation before, and I was like, nature, get it off me a little bit, you know. Like,
it's fine as long as it doesn't touch me.
Yeah, or physical stuff just kind of still freaked me out at that time, because I still felt really unsafe in physical reality. I'm like, no, I'm going with the angels into the dimension.
Yeah. So for someone who's listening to this and is thinking, do they actually exist, these nature spirits? Like, how can I know? I mean, it's hard to share proof, but like, what would you explain to a skeptic?
So I was that skeptic.
Yeah.
So, and I think I might have already told this story, so if people have already heard it, I'm sorry if I'm boring you. But so that same group of friends started talking to me about elementals, and we worked with the Sabbats. That was new to me. And so I really started to develop a relationship with nature, which was different, just kind of getting to know it and going to stone circles. And then when the head witch friend of mine, she was the one I've told you about before, who made spells with her own urine and stuff. She's just like, we're in there, you know, no messing. And she started talking about gnomes and pixies, and I'm just like, yeah, right. I'm used to gnomes with the pointy hats that you get.
Garden gnomes.
I was like, no. But on the way home from her house, I was just thinking, meh. And then I drove past this tree and physically saw with my own eyes this creature hanging onto the bottom of the tree that just looked like a gnome. And I slammed the brakes on my car. What the hell is that? And reversed, and then it had gone. But that was my kind of like, you need to drop the arrogance now, Cara. Yeah. There's something really going on here. So I have physically seen it with my eyes. And I think that's the thing is you need to, if you're interested, cultivate a relationship and then trust your own experiences. But I tell you, they will. I think this is my personal opinion that like nature spirits are kind of like humanity will catch up in a bit. And they like to just point out that we haven't got it all together and sussed in the way that we think we have sometimes. So they will kind of play games a little with you.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your experience?
So I've never seen them and I've always wanted to see them. However, Sarah, the woman at the B&B in Avebury, whom you also know, she sees them and she had a lot of things going on in her garden. And a lot of times we would be chatting in the conservatory and she would say, oh, they're here. They've come in. And she would look and she would take a photograph of like a tree, the tree in her backyard. And then she would show it to me and I could see the faces in there from the photograph. Like I couldn't necessarily see it looking at the tree directly, but I could see it in the photograph. And so that was another interesting way because I'm such a visual person. Like I want to see, but at the same time, I kind of feel like I might be a little bit freaked out.
Yeah.
If I saw them for the first time, but I felt them. There was the time when I was collecting the stories from the Chalice Well Yews. It was at night. I was staying at the Chalice Well Gardens retreat house and no one else was out. The weather was horrible. I was alone and I'm connecting with this tree. And so obviously I'm open and I feel this very clear tap on my shoulder. And of course I look around and there's no one there. And that was when I got the message. The next book or one of the next books was going to be their stories. Wow. But I felt such a clear tap on my shoulder. It was not my imagination. So I have felt them and I have kind of felt their presence and I've talked to them and I've kind of gotten messages back, but I haven't had kind of the long chats that I have with the trees.
Yeah. So there's two key points that you raised there that stand out to me is like being open, how to be kind of open, but also that we see things differently. And when me seeing something physical like that that's got a form is really rare. I'd be interested to know from the people listening whether they see them like that all the time or because sometimes I think they just present an image that we have that makes sense to us to kind of get our attention, or it's part of like the bridge between us and them. That's like how the communication starts. But most of the time, my experience of I'm really drawn to the Fae. I always have been. And I have to be careful because they're kind of like, it's a hypnotic and trance-like energy for me. So have you heard the watch out for the Fae because if they get hold of you, they take you away for 7 years? So I think that is because it's kind of like it can be a really deeply embodied state if you stay grounded, but also it can just be a real escapism and you just kind of just like go off into this other world and everything's magic. So if you have a tendency to like want to opt out of life, like when it gets hard, you just want to live in this dream fantasy state, then watch out when you're working with the Fae.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But most of the time it's just from this like feeling or things change. So an example, last week we went to a new location for our home education group and it's a really old building. It's just fab. I love it. And it's got a lot of grounds and they are untouched woodlands and the kids like from age 2 up to like 15 were just like hanging from the trees. You know, we have permission to just hang from the trees. There's fire pits and it's just really, and it's well taken care of, which is another important point, but it's quite untamed. And we walked into this next clearing and I just said, oh, the Fae are here. And my son said, Mum, I really wish you wouldn't talk like that. And it just like popped out. And then, so what happened then is everything took on this like brighter, everything in that space just looked brighter. It's like it had a shining quality. And divas means shining ones in Sanskrit. Had this shiny, just like everything kind of lit up. And then as I looked around all the people, I could see white light coming from the top of their heads, like this crown of white light. And I'm running around thinking, oh, it must just be like sunbeams and rays and stuff because it was a really like warm and sunny day. But it wasn't. And I think that was a gift from the Fae. It was like, I see auras sometimes, but that wasn't me. That was them. And I think they give you a gift of being able to more easily see their dimension or see a different dimension. So you don't always see them. I didn't see it as like a room full of like beings with wings or anything. It was just, and the whole thing, we were 2 hours and the kids just played and played and played. And that kind of what the Fae.
It's what their energy is.
Really like, like really playful.
So we've been talking about the elementals, the Fae, the gnomes.
Yeah.
Who are the different nature spirits and what different types are they, or what different names do they have?
So there are, I think the easiest way to think of it is there are so many different species of like, or types of flowers and animals. You can say the same for the divas or the Fae. And I am not well versed in all the terms. So if I'm getting them wrong, people could email me and let me know. For me, the nature spirits are split up into like the 4 elementals: air, fire, water, earth. So earth tends to be, you join in if you think anything different, but earth tends to be the gnomes and the pixies. The Fae are for the air, and the elves as well. They're slightly different. Water are mermaids, mermen. I don't know what else.
I think the sprites are also water.
Right. And then the stories about the selkies as well. Water. And then the fire, I stay away from that element. It scares the bejesus out of me. I should really work with it, but I don't. I'm just like,
me too.
Fire. But that's salamander as far as I'm aware.
That's so funny that you say that about fire, because I obviously, as part of my first year druid training, I had to work through the 4 elements and do work with each one. And when I got to fire, I was like, fire. And so we had like all these journaling prompts about fire and how's, fire in your life. And then I had to work with like setting fires in a cauldron, like during my ceremonies. And like I'm setting off the fire alarm, the smoke detector at my house. And I'm just like, God, this damn fire, like it's so inconvenient.
So what is it about you then with fire? I mean, it scares
me too, because I'm the kind of person that will like leave the hob on sometimes. And
I've just done that this morning. And my son's like, I've saved you again, Mum.
So I think because I can be forgetful about fire, I think I'm just very aware of the power of fire. Obviously, water has power, wind has power, there are tornadoes and things. Like, other elements have power. Earthquakes, like, they all have power, but like, I just feel like fire is the power that scares me because I have not been always responsible with it in my kitchen. So if I can't handle fire in my kitchen, like, I don't know if I should be messing around with it in ceremony. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's something that I feel like I need to address and work with it more so that I can have a balanced relationship with all the elements. But fire is definitely the one that I'm like, oh, do I have to?
Interesting. Yeah. And then the other aspects of the elementals is more like the hierarchy again, I guess, is like there's the fairy queen and Pan, the green man, all those kind of archetypes. And Pan is, I really resonate with Pan. And so I don't know if for people that don't know, but Pan is the horned god, and he's the one that pagans were told by Christianity that he represented the devil when they were trying to convert people to Christianity. And for me, it's like it's a very sexual being, and that element, I see Pan and spirit really. But when I walk down, like where we live, I'm just down the road from the ocean, but we've got Cornish streams and trees and things. At the spring, you can just like Pan is just so strong in there. It's like the trees if you look at the trees when spirit's around, or particularly that Pan energy, it just looks like things are leaping and just like celebrating and just in life. And and then I had somebody who's just reached out to me who's doing the channeling course that I have, and it's opened them up and they started to feel impressions in the woods from the fairy queen, and they're just like, whoa, what's this? And
that's cool.
So there's that kind of like, I can't think of the word now, but it is that hierarchy where they're just like in charge of certain parts of the element.
Yeah, it's like their domain and they kind of look after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why might someone want to connect with them?
It's fun. it like brings magic to the mundane sometimes.
Yeah.
It can be really good guidance, I guess. And I get it's a good way of bridging all the things that are really urgent about our environment now.
Yeah.
A lot of it is because we've lost this connection with the idea that Earth is a being of its own right, or we're just really disconnected. So I think we need to make this bridge between us and Earth more, and connecting with the elementals is just a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah.
And we learn so much because they've been around forever. Yeah.
And they've been a part of our folklore and folk tales and fairy tales forever. I mean, there's a reason that they've made their way into our ancient poetry and stories and tales and things. And they've been with us in that kind of literature throughout history. So clearly people have been inspired by them and inspired by the connection with them for millennia.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of the divas are called muses, aren't they? When they help with creativity. And we're not supposed to be doing this alone. We are in this, like, I hate the term co-creative now because it's really getting overused, but that creativity is never done in isolation and it's part of life. And I think what we were talking about before, where I've tried to find out information about this through books or through courses or theories. And what's really come to me is, yes, there are things in books that I find, but when I've asked for information, it's come through stories of other people or other people's experiences. And I think it's just a gorgeous reminder that we've lost the art of storytelling, and we don't give it as much credibility. It's like when I was racking my brains thinking, where did I get all this information from? Or how do I know to just go out and do things? It's like, and I think most of mine has come from just working with people who have been doing the craft for years, and then they pass on information, and then I go and have a direct experience, or I see something non-physical and then question what's that and find out. And I think I am so wired up for academic learning or something like that. We forget that this is a really important way. And I think maybe the information only comes through words as a way of demonstrating how important that is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So do you believe that anyone can learn how to do this? Or do you need special skills?
No, I don't think you need special skills. What you do need to be open. Yeah. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can probably connect because you're curious and you're open. There's something in you already, or else you won't be listening. But I have a story I wanted to share about how I knew that I had closed down in my own life. So a few years ago, I went to a local woods. I had a huge intuitive hit to go there. I had just done an exercise to activate a seed of abundance within me. And the next day I got this huge hit to go to these woods that are like an hour's drive away from me. But I went with somebody who I was spending a lot of time with as well. And we were walking around the woods and I weren't really sure why I was there. And then this person I was with went away and to do their own thing. And I went to this clearing in this woods and it just opened up. That's the best way of describing it. So the greens just took on a really bright green. Everything just went really bright. I could hear a sound as well of things opening up. And I was just like, that's just a dimension. That portal had opened up. Then this person I was with came back and it just went whew, and shut. And I was like, do they not want to be seen by this person? Or what I think it was is I couldn't be open around this person. So that was this friendship is not good for me. And I'd already had like a sense of that, but I wasn't really sure. And it was like they were telling me, because you have to be open. I think we can talk about what that means a bit more, but I don't know about you, but I cloak really well. So if I don't want to be seen, I can cloak my energies. And I realized that I was doing that every time I was around this person. And it's because I knew that because I wasn't open to the elementals in a place that just feels lovely while that person was around. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking cloaking is a good idea. Maybe I should be doing that more, like when I'm out trying to connect with trees or nature spirits so people don't see me. But then if I'm cloaking myself from humans, does that mean I'm closing myself down from the Fae as well and the nature spirits? Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be worth experimenting with because I think it does. I think it does because you just, with the idea with cloaking is you're just pulling all your energy in so that you don't take up any space, which is if you've been brought up as a kid who was criticised or anything like that, you're going to do that automatically. Yeah. Whereas to connect with all these other dimensions, you need to do the opposite of that. You need to open up more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So do you think people need formal learning to do this? Like, should people take a workshop or a class, or can you just go out and try it?
Well, I think you can go out and try it. I think it's useful to have somebody that you can talk to about what you're experiencing to normalize it or to explain it. But you don't have to. But I think it's useful to have a community of people that have, come before you kind of thing. But for me, to begin to do it, it's about connecting and having a relationship with them and with nature. So don't go in, like if you meet somebody, you have to get to know them a little bit and they have to get to know you. It's exactly the same. Yeah. So if you wanted to start trying to connect, don't come away disappointed if you don't have a massive experience straight away. It takes time.
Yeah. It's like building a relationship like you would with a person. Like you wouldn't just walk up to a stranger and be like, right, so talk to me. I'm here. Tell me.
I've done that so many times with Spirit, though. I really have.
Right. And I got told off by one of the trees in my book who said, there was one, he told me he was in my book. He told me he had a story. I went to get the story. And he said, no, not today. Come back tomorrow. And I was like, shit. And then the next day, he was like, you know why I said that. It was because you came in with the wrong attitude. Even though I said I had a story, doesn't mean that, you can just get it whenever you want. So that made me much more aware of my attitude and approaching nature spirits and tree spirits in the way that I would approach a person. You don't walk up to someone that you've never met before and just say, talk to me. It's the same thing. And I think when you're working with things that you can't see, like spirit, for some reason we behave differently. Or I think I did, rather than just approaching them as I would a person.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to go in with the right attitude and kind of tread softly and be like, hey, I'm here. Would anyone like to speak to me? I would like to connect with you. Is anyone around that would like to?
Yeah.
And be more inviting rather than boldly tromping in and saying, right, I'm here. Tell me.
And that's it, isn't it? That just when I was saying about going back to healing our relationship with nature and our environment, it is, we have stomped all over this place.
Yeah.
Called Earth. And I think I've got to say, especially with white people and white supremacy and patriarchy, we have come here and bulldozed our way in. And I think we have still got to unpick that. We're drenched in it.
Yeah.
We don't realize. So I think the response from nature spirits, which is all right.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a bit.
Yeah.
It's really good.
We'll see in a few hundred years when you figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I remember when we went to Avebury, and I remember seeing you at trees and just there's a gnome. And I remember, can you remember me saying to you, you look like a gnome? and I'm like, that must have been the beginning. I don't know what I was seeing about your relationship with trees and things, but you spent a lot of time tidying up.
Yeah.
Clearing up nature. And when I was working with the pagans group, a lot of that was about taking care of the earth and physically tidying it up, clearing it up, be respectful. That's part of I don't think we have to pass a test, but
I think it's
they're
showing.
only going to want to engage with us if we show respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one way of showing respect, if you just take a bag with you and just pick up any rubbish that you see. And I don't always do that, but sometimes it's I can't not do it. I have this compulsion to clear up because I just can't bear to see all the crap that people leave. And I think that's one way of showing them that you're showing respect for nature, that you're showing respect for their world and a decent person, maybe.
And then there's the other part of I don't know whether this comes up in any of your training, but I know when I worked with my pagan friends, whenever we did a celebration or a ceremony or worked in any way, we would take some kind of offering.
Yes.
I really struggled with that. I was kind of still like deeply wounded at that time in my life. I had a lot of unprocessed hurt.
Yeah.
And so when it came to working with, I was fine working in those angelic realms or higher dimensions, but actually seeing it in existence in physical reality, I didn't trust it for a while. I had an attitude of, well, you prove it to me then that you're not going to hurt me. Like, really. So the idea of offerings were kind of just felt like the whole sacrifice thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But then I had an experience. I'd been working with a sea witch, and they'd been teaching me about working with the ebbs, doing magic with the tides and working with that way. And then we were collecting sea glass, which I love.
I love sea glass.
And I got my very first piece of sea glass, and this sea witch teacher said to me, so you give that back to the ocean as thanks. And I just thought, oh, great. And my immediate reaction was, I've just received something as a gift that feels gorgeous, and you're asking me to give it back. And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
At that time.
It's mine.
I really resented that. Yeah. Now I would have a different experience of it. But at that time, that's where I was, ugly as it may be, but that's where I was. And I just said to the spirit of the ocean, I just said, well, if this is what you need me to do, then I'll do it. And I threw it back in. And as soon as I threw it back in, honest to God, no word of a lie, that from the sand, like a wave came in, it wasn't the same piece. I threw that out, and then at my feet, underneath the sand, a piece of sea glass rose up.
Wow.
And I just thought, it don't want sacrifice, but it wants appreciation.
Yeah.
And that's what an offering is for me.
Yeah.
It's not like I have to give something of myself or I have to sacrifice anything. Or it's just like, it's a gift of appreciation. That was a massive learning for me in that. A really big healing. Like, there's an abundance of, like, it doesn't need anything from us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's us that kind of...
It's like a gesture of goodwill.
Yeah, or maybe something a bit deeper.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I see you.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a namaste thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I carry those little strands of tiny little crystal chips that you can get. Like, like these.
Mm-hmm.
So I get these and I take them off the strand and I have them in a little pouch. And so they're really small. I like them because I can leave them as an offering, like a little bit of them. And then they're kind of invisible because with people walking around and nature and leaves, like they end up kind of into the soil. So I feel like it's something it's pretty, it's long lasting, it's sparkly, but it's not obvious. Like it's not, it doesn't look like I left rubbish or something there. So I like those. So that's what or
even just like fruit and things that will degrade, that we don't have to, because I think we're going to need to be a bit more mindful about the crystals that we take from the earth. And
that's
what we're purchasing. And I know it's only just started occurring to me, really, that we're giving thanks with something that we've mined.
That is a good point.
But giving back something that is just naturally bountiful and produced, or even like a rock that you've picked up off the beach or in woods or something.
Yeah, that is a good point. Be mindful of stuff and where it comes from. And I think I'm not always, or as much as I could be.
No, I don't think any of us are. It's just, it's okay because that's where we are.
We're still learning. So what would be your advice for someone who wanted to get started today or this week? What's the first thing they could do to get started connecting with nature spirits?
I would have a focal point. So whether that is a house plant or a plant in your garden or a weed in your garden, or whether it's a specific tree or whatever it is that you're drawn to, I would start with a focal point and ask to connect and cultivate a relationship with whatever it is that you're using as a focal point.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And so do you think I think that's interesting that you said something in your garden. So do you think that you can do it anywhere? Could you do it in a park where there are people around? Do you have to go into deep nature or deep woods?
See, when I lived in a town where the parks were tarmacked and that is the access I had, I used to take my baby in his stroller every morning and go and sit by the foot of the willow tree there. And I would talk to the willow tree and get advice and just connect that way. And there was people walking past, and as far as they were concerned, I was just sat there closing my eyes, leant against a tree, getting a bit of rest. So that's how I started. And then when I went on a tree workshop a few years later, I was told that there was probably a tree that had followed me around all over. And I realised that when I was little in my nana's garden, there was a willow tree that I used to play underneath. And I am drawn to willow trees. And so they kind of find you, like what's right for you finds you. So I won't worry too much about it. I would trust your impulses and trust what you're drawn to. But for me, I was sat on tarmac in a park, town park.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think absolutely anywhere that you feel comfortable doing this. So I have not always felt comfortable in public places. So you know that I've done a lot of work in West Kennet Longbarrow. I like to go there very early in the morning before the tourists get there, because I don't like being there in the afternoon and have like sitting there in silence with my eyes closed and having people walk in going, oh, there's a person in here, because it's disturbing to me. And it also just makes me feel like the weirdo who meditates in tombs.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's something I need to get over. And that's a comfort zone of mine that I perhaps need to stretch.
I think it's key, the word where you feel comfortable, because we've been talking about how being open, trusting your instincts. You can't do that if you don't feel safe.
Yeah. Well, it's not just safe.
The whole thing. So just like, comfortable is safe. Safe enough to relax and do what you're doing. If you're kind of keeping an eye open for anybody coming around, you're not going to be feeling safe enough to open up and just at that level of trusting, because it's subtle energy. It's subtle. So trusting the whispers, trusting your senses and your feelings. Everything that we've said is you've got to be in a space that feels okay to be open enough to do that within yourself, even if you're not communicating. I have a strong sense of entitlement when it comes to spirit work. If I'm doing work on behalf of spirit or connecting with spirit, that comes before anything else, so it doesn't bother me. I could be quite rude, I think, when I'm working for spirit and source, so just work around me. But you've got to find your own way of doing it. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. That's key, to be somewhere comfortable. So if you're comfortable just with a house plant in your own living room to start off with, and then see what grows from there, really.
Yeah, I think that's...
A part is, right, what element are you drawn to?
Yes.
And start there. So for some strange people that are drawn to fire, they might want to start working with a fire pit or a flame of some kind.
Yeah. You said that, and something about it, like, kind of sparked in me. Like, that kind of sounds nice. Like, I don't... Fireplaces in our house are working. They've all been kind of blocked off, but we don't have a fire pit. But, like, something about that kind of went, I might like to...
Oh, what about a candle, then?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a cauldron. I can just go out, set a fire in my cauldron outside, so I'm not setting off the smoke detectors, but...
I've got a cauldron.
I've got a cauldron.
I've got cauldron envy now. I want a cauldron.
So, yeah, but I like that you said that. So I think I might make some connection with fire. And then for people who don't know where to get started, just start with one. I mean, start with one of the elements, give it a try, start with the next one, start with the next. Go experiment with different elements, experiment with different things, and see what works for you.
Yeah, and ask. So that's been anything to do with spirit originally comes from an asking. I'd like to connect with the fae. I would like to connect with the gnomes. I'd like to connect with the divas of the plants, whatever. And then let different things happen at different times as well, because I really didn't connect with flowers until a few years ago. And then I woke up and started to hear whispers from the flowers. And I've got a really good friend. I've got a podcast with her, actually. I'll link it to this. And she's a flower essence practitioner and has been working with them for years. And so I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And she's like, oh, this is really gorgeous, really fun. And they're just so gentle. Yeah. And that's what I needed more of in my life. They had a lesson to teach me. So, yeah, trust that they want a relationship with you as much as you want a relationship with them. Yeah. And then just, get to know each other.
Yeah. And trust that the right spirits will come to you, because different plants and different flowers represent different things, which is something I'm learning on my plant spirit initiation apprenticeship this year. So our last weekend on the course was holly, which is all about nurturing and boundaries and protection. This coming weekend is rose. Very different
I
energy.
love
So it's
that.
all about
Yeah.
relationships. And so I'm really looking forward to experiencing the very different energy of this plant. So trust that whatever you need to experience and whatever you need support with will come to support you.
Yeah, and before we wrap up, I think as well, it's really important to say when not to open. So I would stay away from any nature that just doesn't feel good. You can tell. If you go into nature and spirit's strong, you can tell there's a vibrancy to it that is different. But we do have people that go out in nature that use it as a way to take drugs and to whatever. Each their own to a certain extent. But the energy around that is going to be different, and nature spirits tend to avoid that. And I think part of their role is to kind of help at an energy level to work with that. But then sometimes their workings with that means that they get kind of like taken in by that kind of energy as well. And then, so when I've been kind of researching this a little bit, you can see where plants grow and they can avoid negative energies. So they kind of grow around it. So I would trust anything that doesn't feel good. Pick up the litter, but I wouldn't work there. Certainly not to start with. I would choose water, places that like seemed alive, and you know, the stagnant
where things are flowing.
But there can be ponds and stagnant places, but they can still be full of life. I think most people have a sense of, oh, that just don't feel good, or oh yeah, that feels good, and I would trust that. You know, don't work in places where human beings have been doing things.
I think that's a really, really good point, because there's one very special place for me out in nature, one group of trees they call the grandmothers in my book. And when I first went to that place, I could see that people were there. So there would be like drink, bottles and cans and stuff. Like clearly, probably teenagers were going there to drink in the evenings. And so I just kind of started cleaning it up. And I didn't start working there until probably a couple of years after that. Like I kept going back to that spot because I was really drawn to it. But over time, the energy felt like it was clearing up, and I stopped seeing so much rubbish there. And so I don't know whether someone else was cleaning it up or whether people just stopped using it. But I did notice that shift over time, and I didn't start working with it until it felt different.
So you would have been helping the elements there, I think. So, because there was a place just down the road from us, everywhere is just like this wild natural beauty, and there's caves where people obviously sleep down the road from me, you know, and it's just, that's Cornwall. This is, people choose an alternative life, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. It's done with a real good intention. But there was this one area of woodland that always had drink bottles. Me and the kids would go down to play there and try and climb the trees. And then I started to see that there were bottles and it just didn't feel right. So I banned them from there. But I went and buried crystals and I cast a circle there. But that's because I felt strong in doing that, because I've been doing it for years. And then what happened was, I don't know how this happened, but the whole place just got bulldozed down, which is unfortunate for the trees that were there. But at the same level, it just felt like it really needed to not be a place. It needed to be completely cleared. So as you get stronger in your relationship, in trusting your instincts, then we can help the elements to cleanse a place and work with stone circles to cleanse places and stuff. So, yeah.
Good. So is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap this up? Anything you'd like to add?
No, just trust your own experience and trust your instincts, because that's what elementals help us get back in touch with, I think.
Yeah. And give it a try.
Yeah, and let us know. It's it is really fun.
So let us know what your experience is like. And if you have experience in this, if you've been connecting with the elementals, please let us know how you experience it. If your experiences are different from ours, we would love to hear from you. So please get in touch. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com and
Cara@carawilde.com. And I don't know about you, but I've got a free Facebook group. I will link to this, called Love Notes from the Road, where we explore all these kinds of topics as well. So please feel free to come in and join the conversation in there if that feels right for you.
Good. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and get in touch there. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed, I would like to invite you to do so. That would be fantastic, and it would make it a lot easier for you to get the new episodes into whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Next week's episode will be a solo episode. I don't know what's going to be on yet, but I invite you to join me. And as always, remember to visit hollywharton.com/307 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.